we could,
see,
as a nation, have a lot more gold, and
that's the one thing that I see that actually, I mean, this is a horrible thing to say, but that's the one thing that actually I seen as kind of could be positive. Is that I know that we've taken large sums of gold from those places when we've left. Putin was saying, okay, the U.S. debt is 33 trillion. And then when I had you on, you were saying it was 34. I was saying 34, and you're like, no, it's 34.25 now.
It's probably getting on for 35, I guess.
And that's what I said last week. If it makes it to 34.5, then I mean, we're starting to see an exponential rise here, right? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a run of presidents, and each one seems to manage to double the debt. Yeah, so that is definitely an exponential. 34.5 trillion and rising.
Yeah, so I'm going to write that down. So last time I looked, it was 2 weeks ago, it was like, it was maybe 300 or something.
And that's I mean, it seems a scary number, but it's not. It's the unfunded liabilities that are the scary number.
Okay.
Because I've heard figures of around 120 trillion that the US government has promised to pay out, but it hasn't got. That sort of dwarfs the national debt. And if there's any sort of index linking to those obligations, you can't inflate your way out of the debt. If that debt was just debt, not future debt or future responsibilities, we could just carry on debasing the dollar, and that 34 trillion wouldn't really mean much. We would owe it in cheaper dollars.
Except for the debasement of the money, right?
Yeah, by creating more and more dollars, you pay back in virtually $3. So if it was if just the national debt was the issue, I mean, it's not. I think only 1 or 2 countries have survived after reaching 120% debt to GDP. Japan as being one of them, but I don't think Japan's going to survive much longer. So we'll be the only country who's so far survived with this debt ratio. But because there's so many dollars out there, we can keep on creating more dollars, and it doesn't as dramatically affect the dollars in the US because it's taken a bit of the value of the dollars worldwide.
Yeah. So
our dilution, although it's bad, it's not as bad as when China creates a whole load more yuan. And I think from what I've seen, their debasing is 3 to 5 times worse than ours.
And can I ask you, does their value further? I mean, I realize they themselves are debasing their own currency.
Yeah.
But does their currency also devalues as ours is devaluing? They're kind of getting a double effect there. Yeah, because they're sharing. I mean, the world shares the devaluation that the US does, because was it 83%, I think, of all world trade is done in the dollar. Yeah, that's what I heard, over 80%.
And it looks like it's ticked up recently a little bit.
And that's why their price runs so fast in gold then too. I mean, they're getting hit.
I think there's probably just a retail demand. I think probably the Chinese people who've got any spare fiat currency are trying to buy real things with it, because numerous banks have stolen people's deposits, and if the people turn up to complain or protest, the Chinese government sends in tanks and riot police. So I'm not sure that would happen here. because they'll just keep creating dollars to bail out the banks. Because I think the banks or the owners of the banks call the shots and control the government in the US.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens there between the banks and the Fed, or that it. Yeah, that's kind of could be.
Just seen Wade's comment their economy is already dead. I think actually from what's going on in the rest of the world, there's a lot of capital is fleeing to the US, and I think we're going to see a lot more manufacturing. I mean, I've heard some commenters saying that the US is industrializing at a faster rate than even after the Second World War. So we'll see how that pans out. I'm guessing the figures will have to show that commercial premises, warehouses and stuff, that their value should be holding or rising if that's the case.
So yeah, let's touch on that since we're there, and like, yeah, I heard that over 80% of trade is still done in US dollars worldwide. Yeah. And I know we both agree, that the dollar's on its way out, but when I talk about BRICS, a lot of times I notice that although you agree, that it's happening and whatnot, you don't. I seem to get the feeling that you don't put as much emphasis on.
No, I mean, BRICS. I mean, yeah, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all the other countries that are saying they're going to join. They don't trust their own currencies, let alone other countries' currencies. The only currency in that group that's relatively, very stable is the Indian rupee. They don't want to die. They don't want to tie their currency to currencies that are falling.
Yeah. I mean, they'd have to go to gold,
if they went to gold, well, then wouldn't the rich people in the West just buy all the gold?
Well, yeah, I mean, then that's kind of what I'm wondering, and I'm not sure that's not going to happen. Like, we're seeing that arbitrage going on, and it just makes me wonder: do they know that the gig is up, and that's what the game they're playing, and we're over here playing a paper game, not paying attention?
Yes, and in a way we can afford to, because the dollar will die last. I didn't used to agree with Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory, but it's been proven right.
Yeah.
Well,
even he believes that eventually gold is where we'll end up. Yeah. So it's all just kind of a timing with him, and yeah, he's saying, well, the dollar is going to be stronger for longer than some of us that are thinking. And so far, like you say, he's looking pretty good.
Yeah, and then the dollar, on most basic of monetary principles, the dollar only has value whilst you can buy gold with it.
Right. That's what I think a lot of people maybe don't notice, but yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And as the price of gold in dollar terms rises, that means it gets harder and harder to buy gold with the dollar, especially for modest purchases. So if we keep seeing gold going up in dollar terms, it's the writing's on the wall. But I think we have a privilege here that the currency collapse,
that we are the strongest of what we have.
The dollar is a rubbish currency, but it's the least rubbish currency.
No doubt for sure. Yeah, I mean, we do have the benefit on that side. However, this last pop-up, I think is going to be a pretty good. Like I say, I think it's going to put a spotlight on things, but we'll see, I guess.
And eventually, LLC countries will have to prove what their gold reserves are at some point.
Yeah. And what's your feelings on?
Well, I used to be convinced that the US hasn't got it. It's 8,800 tons at West Point and Fort Knox and wherever else it's supposed to be stored, because it's not had a proper audit. Was it 1951 or 19? It was the 1950s that last had a so-called proper audit. But I don't think the financial people who are actually in control of this country are that stupid. I just wonder if all the wars we've been involved in, one of the reasons wasn't just to go get the gold. You know, I mean, in Iraq, we were told it's weapons of mass destruction. Well, what if that weapon of mass destruction is gold? Because gold is a weapon of mass destruction against fiat currencies eventually.
Right.
So that might have been what that war is about.
Yeah, and that's what that was kind of the final piece that they grabbed, right?
And I would bet 100% that Iraq hasn't got as much gold now as it had before the US got involved.
Right, no doubt.
Same with Afghanistan, the Philippines, and you know, who else? Who knows elsewhere? So we could, as a nation, have a lot more gold, and
that's the one thing that I see that actually, I mean, this is a horrible thing to say, but that's the one thing that actually I seen as kind of could be positive. Is that I know that we've taken large sums of gold from those places.
You know, and I know this is complicated, and I don't want to jump too fast from subject to subject, but we had 4 or 5 decades of globalization, and it was US policy to allow free trade everywhere on the presumption that that would stop war. So the US built out the largest navy ever seen, and it's still by a factor of 10 larger than the next largest navy.
Wow.
To enable global free trade. Well, from what I see, the US is withdrawing from that. The sanctions on China just keep on growing, and the tariffs, they keep on growing. They're being enforced. We have the semiconductor bans that are growing. Looks like we're going to turn TikTok off pretty soon. We turned off Huawei in the US. I think the US is retreating into a trade alliance of just a few countries. And if you look at the US, the geography of the US, we are food sufficient. We're food exporters. We are net energy exporters. We're probably the only nation on earth that can do everything easily that it needs to do at home.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Yeah.
You know, and I think compared to other countries, we actually a very small percentage of our economy is importing and exporting.
Yeah. Interesting. So since we're on that, let's talk a little bit about, in some of our private conversations, and you don't, share what you feel and not otherwise, but you talked about coming to this country, and in some of our conversations, all in some out of frustration say something, and I kind of noticed that you kind of bounce back on the other side of that, and so I want to hear more about, because I was born here, and so now how I view the U.S., I'm a little upset as who we're becoming. But I was born here and I've grown up here, and so for you coming over here, what's your perspective? And you seem still quite positive, is where I'm.
I am. I mean, on a historical timeline of nation development, I mean, you could say the US is 15, 16 years old. That's a difficult age. So I'm hopeful that we have more than a core. I think we have a silent majority of good, honest, decent people in this country.
Yeah.
Now, maybe my experience with, building the bullion business, meet a lot of people, get to make a lot of friends. Yes, that's a select community for sure. But it feels everywhere I've traveled in the US that the bulk of the people want to lead an honest, decent life. They have normal aspirations. They might want to have a home, build a family, be able to retire comfortably.
Yeah, well, that's the American dream, right? And that's fucking shaky, but you still have a positive outlook on that, and somewhat anyway.
Yeah, I mean, sort of going back, you look at the agricultural area of the US. We have the best agricultural land in the world. We have I think we have 16,000 navigable waterways for bulk moving agricultural and industrial products and materials around, which is incredibly cost efficient. You know, I think that's more than the rest of the world put together of navigable waterways. So just the geography of the land should lead to success. It's just, I think, somehow we need to encourage people that the American dream isn't dead. It's harder.
And it's trying to be.
It seems less accessible, but I think of all the countries on Earth, I mean, you look at how many nationalities are trying to get here. You know, whether by legal or illegal means, that's sort of a sign, but it's not a bad place if people are trying to get here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Neil, I agree. America is the best country in the world. Yeah. Neil Hahn's dynasty.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear, and it's good to you know, when you got here, you were still excited to be here. You still have excitement.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah. I mean, I obviously am hoping for the best, but yeah, I just get a little frustrated because I know, I've looked into, what we were supposed to be and what they're teaching is obviously two different things. But
yeah, I mean, there's the old saying, isn't it? I don't even know who coined it in the first place, that hard times breed strong men breed easy times breed weak men, and you go back round again.
Yeah,
undoubtedly for 4 or 5 decades, America has prospered without, after the Second World War, it was the only nation left standing with any sort of industrial base. So therefore, America exported and did well. But through the distortions in the monetary system, it still was it. The US exported 14,000 tons of gold, keeping gold fixed at $35. So if that shenanigans hadn't gone on, I think the situation would have been much, much fairer.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, who owns the gold makes the rules, isn't it? Eventually.
That's what I've been told. Seems to be what it looks like through our past history, anyway. So
yeah.
And even them coming out and declaring it a tier 1 asset, and they're buying it up as fast as they can get a hold of it. And definitely know, I'm sorry, but you definitely know it's the real underbasing of reality. Now, what they try to feed us or put in as a smokescreen could be two different things. But
yeah, and that was the Bank of International Settlements, wasn't it? Declared gold as a tier 1 asset, with the only previous tier 1 asset being US debt.
Yeah.
Well, we know US debt's not tier 1. It can't be. You're never going to get your principal back. Oh, here we go. Tiger Stacker's got the original quote up. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And background we go. So yeah, I guess there's no easy route through. We've had good times. We've created, I don't know, can you blame the population? It's easy to blame, isn't it? But it the powers of the media and the television and all the nonsense we get from our politicians.
Yeah,
they get people fighting against each other, expending their energy without noticing what's actually going on.
Yep.
So I don't think you can blame people. I mean,
right.
I think it's our responsibility to keep helping people understand what is going on and do what they can do to prepare.
Here.
Yes, Wade Wheelington. Keep on stacking. Yeah.